everybody, it's Jeff. And I'm glad you're here to watch this short. And this short here is going to be about Star Trek First Contact. And I had some of an idea of an explanation of how the Enterprise E could have got to Earth so fast from the Romulan Neutral Zone. Okay, and it's an idea that I had to work out in my mind here, but I come up with something that sounds pretty, feasible. Okay, and it sort of links to Star Trek 3, the search for Spock. And my idea is that sometime after Wolf 359, the Battle of Wolf 359, Starfleet decided they needed to do, something else other than just build ships that were designed to fight the Borg. They also needed to find a way to get ships to rendezvous at a certain point where they know the Borg would be in an instantaneous fashion. And they realized that only certain ships would be able to do this because it requires a great deal of power to do. And clearly the ships that are like maybe above the Intrepid class on up would probably be the ships that would have this ability, because they're much larger and they require a lot of energy in order to accomplish this. And so my idea was that in their consideration of how they would do this, they went back to some of the historical engineering data from the late 23rd century, where they were working on transwarp drive, trying to make ships go faster through space. And maybe it was in that research that they discovered a way to create an emergency velocity to bring a ship near instantaneously to some point within the range of this emergency speed. Okay, so I mean, you can't use it to go across the galaxy. You can only use it within so many light years, and that's it. Okay, and maybe because they knew at the time Federation was going to war with the Dominion and all that this was probably something they were going to need in a fast way. So they had to sacrifice safety and caution here with engineering regulations and stuff like that in order to bring ships to a point where they can fight. And so they began upgrading this system in emergency speed. I don't know what they would call it. Okay, it wouldn't be transwarp, it would be something else, because this would not be something they could use constantly. It's only a speed that can be used once, and then once it's done, the warp nacelles have to be replaced because they're no good after that. So this is a one-way trip thing. So that's the reason why they don't use it so much. And the Enterprise did in Star Trek First Contact, that perhaps the ship Enterprise E had that ability to get from the neutral zone, which is quite a distance from Earth, all the way back to Earth in time to engage the Borg, which, if you remember, they were listening to the war as it was happening on their communication system on the bridge while they were still out at the neutral zone, and they needed to get there fast. So Picard decided to disobey orders to bring his ship there, and they had to use that emergency feature, which rendered their nacelles useless after that. And so that's how they got there. And I know some people would say, well, they were able to go use time warp and stuff like that. Well, not necessarily. They didn't really use their nacelles for that. When they went into the past, they were following the Borg sphere, which had already created the warp vortex, the time vortex ahead of the ship, which pulled the Enterprise E into it because they were following the sphere. So they, with the sphere, ended up in the past. And by recreating what the sphere had done using their navigational deflector, they were able to recreate that vortex and send the ship back to the point where they left. And without having to use their warp drive, that's how they did it. And of course, once they were there, that would explain why the nacelles look slightly different in Star Trek Insurrection. It's probably because those were newer nacelles attached to the Enterprise E in that particular movie. Okay, they had different nacelles. So I think that's probably what happened. I think maybe that's what it is. Of course, there's no there's no way you can canonize what I just said, okay? It wasn't mentioned in the novelization. It wasn't mentioned in the movie itself, okay? This is just a fan theory here, based on what we know about things in Star Trek. And, you know, it's been suggested many times in different episodes of, you know, TOS all the way up into TNG, that the neutral zone is a, you know, is a very, very far distance from Earth and all them, and so it's always been that way, that to, you know, getting communications from Earth at that distance is a big to-do. You know, they got to have a lot of medium there in order to transmit a message there and back, okay? And so that's the only thing I could come up with. And if you're asking why didn't Voyager use it during the series, and it goes back to what I said, that perhaps it has a limited range. It can't instantaneously send you to any place in the galaxy. It can only work for so many light years, and that's it. So if you're within that range, it'll be fine. But if you're like where the Voyager was, you know, tens of thousands of light years away, it's not going to get you all the way home, and then you've got no warp nacelles. You know, you have no warp drive at that point. You'd have to replace them. And as you know, I mean, Voyager was on its own, and there was no place to get, you know, materials to repair some of the more critical systems. So they wouldn't have used it. You know, they certainly can't sacrifice their warp drive. So I'm thinking that's probably a system that these starships, the bigger ones, have, not the smaller ones, but, you know, the larger ones have this ability. And as for the smaller ones, they probably keep them close, you know, close to home, so that way they can be assembled quickly when they need to be, to repel an attack by the Borg or whatever enemy happens to be there. So anyway, tell me what you think about this idea, and hopefully there'll be some feedback here. And I'll talk to you guys another time. So thanks for listening, and take care. Happy Easter, everybody.
Thanks for watching. And don't forget to subscribe.